بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم لا حول ولا قوة الا بالله العلی العظیم الحمد لله رب العالمین و صلی الله علی سیدنا و نبینا ابی القاسم المصطفى محمد و آله الطیبین الطاهرین لا سیما بقیة الله فی الارضین عجل الله تعالی فرجه الشریف. اللهم اخرجني من ظلمات الوهم واكرمني بنور الفهم. اللهم افتح علينا ابواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا ارحم الراحمين. Alhamdulillah, we have tawfiq to continue our study of Sharh Manzumah or commentary on Manzumah by Ayatummah Mutahhari, and we were talking about four types of ilah or cause. Just a quick review. We said that from the time of Aristotle, there has been an established way of introducing four types of cause: al-illatul maddiya, al-illatul suriya, al-illatul fa'iliya, al-illatul ghaiya. So we have material cause, we have formal cause, we have active cause or the originating cause, and we have the end, the purpose, which also is considered as a cause because it is because of that purpose that the agent does this. So it is sharikul illat al-fa'iliya in a sense, like surah, which is also sharikul illat al-fa'iliya. So we discussed about these four, and then we had three questions. We answered the first one, and we are today going to answer to the other two. The first question was why they call al-illatul maddiya and al-illatul suriya, why they call them internal causes, al-illalul dakhiliya or muqawwima. And we gave the answer because these are inside معلول. Why they call illat fa'iliya wa illat ghaiya al-illal al-kharijiyya, external causes, because they are outside the being of معلول. فاعل, for example, if you have a chair, the carpenter is not inside the chair, or the reason that the carpenter made this chair is not inside. So this is what we answered. Now we have two more questions, and here the discussion sometimes gets very complicated because Ayatummah Mutahhari was teaching this book maybe to some students who were familiar or were advanced, or I don't know, he wanted to show them the depths of Islamic philosophy. So he brings ideas that for someone that was using this book as a first book on philosophy would be difficult. But alhamdulillah, you have also had already different books before, so inshallah you can absorb it. And you also appreciate the great work that Allama Tabatabai has done in producing Bidayatul Hikmah and Nihayatul Hikmah, because Manzumah and this brief commentary of Manzumah, they are great works, but the way that Allama has designed Bidayatul Hikmah and Nihayatul Hikmah is very good for purpose of teaching. And for example, here you see we have discussions about qawwa, fail, haraka that Ayatollah Mutahhari mentions. But we have not yet had discussion about quwwa and fi'l that much independently. But because he was teaching this perhaps to people who had studied this before in another book or level, then he talks about this. But Allama Rahmatullah Alayh brings these things in Bidayah gradually. You know that before Bidayah was compiled, so the main text was Manzumah and Sharh Manzumah, which is a great book, and it's the summary of Aswar, and some people say it's like the almond oil. If Aswar is like almond, it's almond oil. It's a great book. But for the sake of teaching, it's not very straightforward and it's deep. So Ayatollah Quddusi Rahmatullah Alayh, who was in charge of Madrasa Haqqani, which later became Shahidain, he was a student of Allama Tabatabai and also his son-in-law. And he requested Allama to compile a textbook that can be used for teaching philosophy. And one of my teachers, said that they used to receive it piece by piece. And their teacher, used to teach them. And if I am not mistaken, the first teacher was Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli, that Allama had asked him per request of Madrasa Haqqani to teach them. And this letter also is also available, that Allama says, they have asked me to ask you, and so Ayatollah Jawadi maybe at that time was teaching more advanced books, but he agreed out of respect for Allama to teach them Bidayatul Hikam. Of course, at that time, Ayatollah Jawadi was much younger, but still was very established scholar. So here we have some ideas that are complicated, and he sometimes refers to some issues to, cause more attention and raise interest in the students, and says, in another place they can be discussed. So the second question and the third question are what we want to discuss. The second question is, what is the relation between al-illatul maddiya and al-illatul suriyya? So these two types of illat al-dakhiliyya, what's the relation between them? And what's the relation between al-illatul fa'iliyya and illatul ghaiyya? The third question is, what is the relation between these two? Okay, let's start with the relation between illat al-maddi and illat al-suri. Ayatullah Mutahhari Rahmatullah Alayh says, as we said, madde is hamilul quwwati wal isti'dad. Madde is the carrier for potentiality. Madde is not responsible for fa'liyya, for actuality. It is surah, the form, which is responsible for actuality, for kamalat of that thing, perfections of that thing. Madde is the principle, if you can call it principle, that is responsible for changes or accepting new forms, new actualities, because it has quwwa, potentiality. But surah is the principle or the criterion for fi'liyah, for actuality. Suppose we have an egg. This egg can become a baby chicken, and then a grown chicken. So there are potentials for turning from an egg into a chicken. Inside egg, we have two aspects. The form, the surah, which is making egg an egg. But there is also madda. And this madda is potentially a baby chicken, or has the potentiality of becoming a baby chicken. So there are two aspects. Here, there is not that much discussion when we go after I explain the relation between illat, fa'ili and suri, then there is a discussion starting about this. But a little bit wait, and then we go back to this. And because I'm following the book, so the book first has a brief discussion, and then there is objection and answer. With respect to illat maddi and suri, we can say these are two phases of a reality. Egg is an egg. This is one phase, to be egg. Another phase is to be a baby chicken. Another phase is to be whole, a grown chicken, for example. Then he says, Masha'un and Ishraqiyun, the peripatetic philosophers and illuminationist philosophers, they have a very important difference here. Masha'un were very much focusing on distinction between qawwa and fi'l. And as a result, for them, madde and surat are two separate things. Not separate in the sense that they have no connection, but I mean two distinct things. Madde and surat are two distinct things. They bring argument to show that we have something real as madde, matter, something real as surah, form. But Ishraqiyun, they don't believe in combination of madde and surah, and they have doubt about the argument of qawwa wa fi'l by Masha'in. To expand, Ayatummah Mutahhari says, every physical being, every jism, every corporeal being, every physical object is something actual and at the same time can turn into something else. Egg is actually an egg and can turn into a chicken. There are two opinions here. One is the opinion of Ishraqiyun, which says these two aspects are different only in consideration, i'tibaran. What we have is only egg. To have the potential for becoming a chicken is our analysis. Not there is something really there as a small chicken or as a potential chicken or as a kind of principle for that, or no, just there's a chance. there's a chance that likelihood that an egg can become a chicken, and perhaps there are things there that makes this chance higher. This is because Mashai very much, take into account that sometimes potentiality is قريبة من الفعل القوة القريبة من الفعل. This استعداد is اشتدادي. It's getting degrees higher and higher. We don't want to go into that discussion, but anyway, for Masha'in it's not just likelihood or probability. For Masha'un there is a phase of becoming a chicken. There is a phase of that already there. But for Ishraqiyun, no, it's just i'tibar. It's just a consideration. It's idafa, it's a matter of relation. So we say this egg in relation to that chicken, we can say it's bil quwwa. But there is not such a thing, so that we don't need madde. It's like fawqiyya and tahtiyya, or qabliyya and ba'diyya. For example, you say yesterday is before today. Today is after yesterday. Or the ceiling is above the floor. The floor is under the ceiling. But before, after, above, below, they are not making any differences, they are not new realities. What you have is ceiling and what you have is floor. You don't have fawqiyya or tahtiyya. This is our consideration, our mental analysis. Or we have yesterday and today, but to say that yesterday was before today and the day before yesterday was 2 days before today, and you can consider any time in the past and say it was how many days before today. These are considerations. These are not real. Otherwise, every day can have endless relations with other days in the past and future. You can say, this day is, 1 million days after, I don't know, that particular day. 1,000,001 day after that. These are considerations. It's not that they really are attached to today. So one idea was by Ishraqiyun, Sheikh Ishraq and his followers, denying that these are real. These potentials are making madde as a real thing. No. The other opinion is the opinion of people like Ibn Sina and his followers, Masha'un. And then he says, we can also suggest a third opinion based on substantial motion by Mulla Sadra. And that is to say that everything is in journeying, everything is in motion, everything is turning into something else. And therefore, it's one being, and the combination or unity between quwwa and fi'l, between potential and actuality, is in motion. So, because one thing, it makes it easier to appreciate that they are not totally analysis of mind. It's one thing. So when we have egg, that is beginning of a chicken. Not we have egg and then we have chicken, for example. So according to hukama, according to philosophers, every jism, every physical object is combined of two haysiyya, two considerations. One is the criterion for actuality, and one is for potentiality. The one which is responsible for actuality is surah, the one which is responsible for potentiality is madda. Then Masha'un themselves have a kind of disagreement inside their camp about what type of unity is there? What type of relation madde and surah have? Is it انضمامی or اتحادی? Means are madde and surah just put next to each other, attached to each other, or they make a unity? اتحادی. He says, according to Sayyid Sadr Shirazi, and then later according to Mulla Sadr Shirazi, if there is any combination between madde and surah, it is اتحادی, not انضمامی. It means that it's not that just two things are put together. For example, suppose you have some money and then you add some money to this money, then another money. This is انضمامی, easily also separable. When it is change in quality, it's not like just putting money in money. There are different degrees of the same thing. Then he says, madde, here he wants to also disagree with Hakim Sabzewari a little bit. He says madde, as we said, can be defined as حامل الاستعداد والقوة, carrier, the one that carries, the one which is responsible for قوة, for potentiality. Madde in this sense precedes surah. We have to have madde and potentiality so that surah can belong to or can be gifted or granted. Unless you have potentiality, surah cannot come. And when surah comes, there is no longer potentiality. You know that. When we have قوة to something, for example, قوة for being a chicken, potential. When we have chicken, which means actual chicken, do we have a still potentiality for chicken? No. That potentiality has been replaced with actuality. Potentiality does not remain with actuality. Yeah, this is obvious. Never potentiality and actuality can be together. Yes, it can be actuality and potentiality of something else, but not potentiality of the same thing. So, if we look at it this way, then we have to say that madde as a حامل استعداد, as carrier of استعداد and قوة, potentiality, precedes in time surah. Therefore, surah is then مناط فعلية المركب, is the reason or the criterion for actuality of the compound, or even the madde. Madde and surah in this sense cannot exist together at the same time. Madde was there, led to surah. Potentiality became actuality. Potentiality and actuality cannot exist together, cannot form a compound. Then this surah becomes madde for another surah, the next surah. That's fine. For another thing, but not the same madde that was for this actuality. So he says, when they say madde and surah are like illat maddi and illat suri, which exist together so that we can have معلول, it's not madde in this sense. because madde in this sense doesn't exist anymore, because potentiality finished and actuality replaced it. He says, yes, from words and sayings of Mulla Sadra and Bu Ali, we can understand that madde is used by philosophers in another sense too. And we have to be able to distinguish. And Ayatummah Mutahhari says, it seems that Hakim Sabzewari has not made distinction between these two types of meaning for madde. Sometimes madde is حامل استعداد الشيء, something that carries potentiality of something. This finishes when the surah comes. Sometimes madde is not حامل الاستعداد, is محل السورة, because surah needs a subject to belong to, and this remains. If you remember when we talked about, especially in Bidayah, here also we had some reference. When we talked about the difference between Jawhar and Araz and Madde and Surah. Although Araz is an wujda fi mawdu, Surah also needs a kind of mawdu and mahal. But the difference is that we said Araz has a mawdu that is independent from Araz. But Surah has a mawdu and mahal that needs Surah. It needs Surah. It's Jawhari. In any case, if you mean by madda Hamilul Ista'dad, it doesn't exist at the same time as Surah. So you cannot say these two are compound or combined or united and we have something. So it's wrong to call madde in the sense of Hamilul Ista'dad as one of the two types of illat al-dakhiliyya, internal cause. But if you mean by madde mahallu surah, that part of this being that surah has belonged to and is already there carrying this surah, then yes, they exist together. Ayatummah Mutahhari says, این دو اصطلاح منشأ اشتباهات زیادی شده و می شود. These two different meanings and expressions have caused and still cause many mistakes. He says, Hakim Sabzewari on the one hand says surah is Hamilul Istidad, and on the other hand he says madde wa surat are like ilal dakhiliyya, and he says these two cannot be together. The next issue that he mentions is that according to Masha'un, peripatetic philosophers, jism is a combination of madde and surah. And they call each of madde and surah cause for reality of jism. Therefore, they call one illat al-Suri and one illat al-Maddi. Illa is something that Ma'lul needs. You remember we said illa has two meanings. A general, a broad sense is كل ما يتوقف عليه وجود الشيء. A second one, which was narrower, was al-illatul fa'ili or al-illatul mufida, the one that grants hasti. So if we say madde and surah are illat suri and illat maddi, and they are both needed for existence of معلول, so you must then allow and accept that madde has to contribute to reality of jism. Surah also contributes. There is no problem. About surah, no ambiguity. About madda. So, when you say these two are illa, one suri, one maddi, but all illa, dakhili for something, means they both contribute to reality of something. But the problem is that philosophers say, like Ibn Sina, Mulla Sadra, they say حقيقة الشيء بصورته or بفصله الأخير شيئية الشيء بصورته لا بمادته. It's very similar to saying حقيقة الشيء بفصله الأخير. They all quote the same line. So شيئية الشيء بصورته. Why something is apple, why something is orange, why something is an elephant, why something is horse, why something is human being? Because of their surah. So on the one hand, they have to say حقيقة الشيء بمادته وصورته. If we want to say madde is also part of the cause. Why here they just say بصورته? Isn't it that if one juz is missing, then the whole must be missing? How can حقيقة الشيء be just because of surah, but madda is also juz? So this is also an issue. Ayatummah Mutahhari says the answer is that madde is not what Haji Sabzewari and others have said about hamilul istidad. If we say madde is hamilul istidad, yes, this problem is there. So when they are saying haqiqatu shay bisuratihi, this is in contrast to madde as hamilul istidad. Otherwise, if you take madde as the partner of surah and mahal of surah, that is also important and contributes to reality, a haqiqah of something. But the thing is that it's not as important as surah, but it is important, but not as important as surah. And he says maybe the problem is this example of, for example, making a chair, making a desk, and they say wood is madde, this design is surah. Yeah, so they mention chub or wood as madde. He says maybe because of this wood, that it's very important in having this wooden chair. So they say, this is illat dakhili, is illat muqawwam, part of illat muqawwam, illat maddi. But as I very quickly mentioned yesterday, illat maddi is not wood, if you want to take it as hamilul istidad. Wood still is part of the surah, and this is why you still have the wood visible in chair. Wood is also part of the surah. So this is why I said many times yesterday that this is a very simplified example. Ayatummah Mutahhari says maybe also there is another reason, a second reason for this problem, and that is to compare and liken philosophical combination with empirical, scientific, natural combinations. When we say madde and surah are combined, it's not like oxygen and hydrogen are combined and they make, water, for example. In such combinations, you have 2 or 3 or more things that they are combined, they have interaction when you have a new thing, and without any parts, that thing doesn't take place and that thing cannot continue. The combination between madde and surah is not like oxygen and hydrogen being combined in water. And it's not like wood and some nail and design becomes a chair. Even it's not like salat, which is a combination of takbiratul ihram, standing, qiyam, recitation, qira'ah, ruku, to bend, prostration, sajda. When you bring these parts, it's as if you have salat. Of course, there is also kind of continuity which is needed. But tarkib of madde and surat is not like this. It's not like these parts, which if one part is missing, then the combination is damaged. Although according to opinion of sahihiyin, one part is missing, this is not salat. According to a'ammiyun in al-Usul, you remember, maybe some part is missing, but still it can be called salat. So we are talking about philosophical combination. Philosophical combination can be sometimes so subtle that you cannot think of parts being separate from each other. You cannot even think of parts existing independently, even before. So, like for example, وجود ماهية. كل ممكن زوج تركيبي من وجود وماهية. This is my example. Every contingent being is a combination of wujud and mahiyya. Can you think of wujud and mahiyya as 2 parts, like oxygen and hydrogen? No. Wujud and mahiyya are like 2 sides of the same coin. But even when you say 2 sides of the same coin is a problem, because this side of the coin is different from the other side of the coin. Yeah? It's as if there are 2 separate things. This is even closer than 2 sides of the same coin. And 2 sides of the same coin are equally important. But when we say asalatul wujud or asalatul mahiyya, means one part is more important. So philosophical combinations are different. So what we can say, and he says we can leave this discussion for other places, but we can say that understanding of 4 causes that Aristotle introduced is makhdoush. We cannot say it exactly as he said. There are much more sophistication needed, and perhaps of course Aristotle also didn't mention this as his final opinion. Perhaps he was also thinking of a way to simplify for sake of teaching. What about the second part of the question? Second question was, what's the relation between madde and surah, and what is the relation between illat fa'ili and illat gha'i? This is the second part of the second question. So he says, again, these 2 have some kind of unity with each other. It's somehow, not exactly, somehow, علت فاعلی is like ماده. علت غایی is like صورة. Or you can say علت مادی and علت صوری. علت غایی completes علت فاعلی. This is why Hakim Sabzewari, what did he say? He said, للوجود الفاعلی التمامی. Al-Fa'ali means علت فاعلی. التمامی means علت غایی. But why he says علت غایی is علت تمامی? Because it's completion of علت فاعلی. This carpenter was sitting and doing nothing. Then he started making a chair. What motivated this carpenter who had the wood, who had the nails? What motivated him to make this? علت غایی. He wanted to sell or sit on the chair, rest on the chair. And before this, his person was there, but he was not fa'il. What made him fa'il is illat gha'i. And this is why, if people in life, they have no purpose, they don't do anything. If they have purpose but not ambition, they are satisfied with little things. It's very important to have purpose and to be somehow ambitious in your purpose so that you work harder and you utilize your talents, skills, and develop your potentialities. So, he says philosophers often say that the relation between surah and madda is like the relation between fa'il and fi'l. Sometimes they call surah fa'ilul madda. Means it is surah that makes madda happen and exist. Surah is important. In human beings, if we didn't have nafs natiqah, our body was not there. We need surah to have the madda. So they call surah as sharikul illah or sharikatul fa'il. So fa'il with creating the soul keeps and maintains madda in existence. Similar to this, also relation, we can talk about qaya and fa'il. So fa'il uses surah, but fa'il himself or itself is made fa'il because of illat qa'i. The third issue was, what's the third question? What's the relation between illat maddi and suri on the one hand, or illat dakhiliya, internal ones, and the external ones, illat fa'ili, illat suri, on the other hand? What's the relation between these two sides? Ayatummah Mutahhari says, علل خارجیه are ما به الوجود، ما بهی وجود المعلول. So they give existence to معلول, and معلول is their effect, their athar. Okay? Because they are creating. They are external, but external in the sense that they are higher. They are above and they give existence to معلول. But ilal dakhiliye are lower than them because they are part of معلول or parts of معلول or somehow inside Ma'lul somehow. So Najjar, the carpenter, is different from chair. Najjar is higher in philosophical analysis. You should have Najjar and then you can have chair. You should have Najjar and the motivation for, selling this chair so that the chair will be made. He says in human products, human creation, what we have is the agent uses materials which exist and gives them form. So the carpenter just gives the form of the chair. Wood, which is the madda, the matter, is not made by Najjar. Someone who makes containers from clay just is using the matter, which is clay, and giving form. This is why khalq for us is more a matter of giving form. We are not doing khalq like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who gives existence. No, we have to have a material and then change the form. Sometimes we just change arazi, we take it from one place, put it another place. No, sometimes we also maybe change the form if it's jawhari. But madda has to be there. But what about the whole world? Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even now can create something without any matter. Of course he can, but if he wants, that's another issue. And at least at the beginning, he created the matter and form, not just the form. Now, when a human being is created, the matter is already there. And what, for example, the body of embryo is and how much it weighs, so it is reduced from the rest of the matters available, yeah? So if it is 5 kilograms, the baby, for example, 4 kilograms, it is taken from the nature. And therefore, if you put it together, it's the same. Nothing is lost and nothing is increased. But the first creation was ex nihilo. There was no madde. But human beings have no such power to create without madde. Yes, in mind maybe, but in outside world, we don't have this ability. But maybe in the heaven, or maybe some people even in dunya, Allah gives them ability to say kun fayakun. But we don't have right now such power. So, what was the first matter and issues related to the first creation? He says these are things that are very detailed and we cannot enter into discussion now. So we leave it for another time. So, alhamdulillah, the first part finished about eلیه, which was about divisions, classifications, definitions, etc. Then the next one is more focused discussion on غایه. As you remember, Ayatummah Mutahhari said, we had it yesterday, that one thing which is very important for us, and it's a kind of point of disagreement between Muslim philosophers and religious philosophers in general, and philosophers who don't believe and they are materialists, is the issue of غایه. That this world and things that happen in this world have purpose and end, and they move to that direction. So inshallah we talk about this in the next session. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. I am sorry that today was very complicated. I did my best to simplify and make it easy. I hope inshallah was understood.
Thank you. Yes.
It was clear?
Yes.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you.
Any question? You are welcome. May Allah bless you.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome. May Allah bless you, inshallah. Inshallah, next week, bi'Iznillah, I am coming to Qom, so we might not have a class next week, at least on Tuesday. I'm not sure. I will let you know depending on the ticket. But then after that, we can have, inshallah, in person, inshallah, for Qom students, and online again for people from UK. Inshallah, I need your du'as for, inshallah, blessed, inshallah, trip.
Inshallah.
Thank you. Iltimas da. Thank you. Fi amallah.
Thank you.
Iltimas da. Fi amallah.